Hello, everyone. Oh, and we're highlighted. Hey, our backgrounds look really good next to each other.
Nice.
Really, that's cool.
The mustard is shining through.
Yeah. What is that your office? Where are you?
This is my office.
Oh, gorgeous. Oh, hello,
Mhm.
team.
This artist is an amazing artist named Zé Palito, a Brazilian artist who now resides principally in Miami and in New York.
Well, amazing. Thank you for treating us to beautiful artwork.
Happy to.
I have I feel like I should put this is
Yeah.
my That's by the way. So this is Ruth. And you know how she looks very angelic? Total
Yes.
advertising.
Yeah. That I understand. As the father of four,
Mm.
I assure you I understand.
Well, we should get started. Welcome everyone, and welcome David. You all know me. I'm Leslie Feinzaig. I'm the managing director, founder at Bremen Walker, originally the founder of the Female Founders Alliance. And I'm very, very excited to introduce you all to our new friend, David Hornik, who is a founding partner at Lobby Capital, the creator and executive producer of the Lobby Conference. I'm going to read a little bit about you and then we're just going to get into it. David
Yeah, very little.
very little. You know what? Actually,
We'll get to it. It
I'm going to
doesn't
read
matter.
about you because
Yeah.
people are going to Google you or they already have. And so why don't we just get started and let's hear it from your perspective. Like, what has your journey been like from the start to today? You're
Yeah.
like a roundabout
So
venture
true.
capital.
It's funny. I was at an event at Stanford last night. It was this arts event, and there was this astonishing jazz trio that was playing and of students. And so when the thing finished, I went up to chat with them and I said, "Oh my, you're all amazing. Tell me what you're up to, etc." And they were all music people. And two of the three of them studied at this place called Karma. And Karma is the Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics. It's the computer music lab at Stanford, which is this amazing place. And one of them was I guess both of them maybe were computer music majors. And I was like, oh my God, that's so exciting. They're sort of like, really? Why? And I said, because I was the first one to major in that crazy major. I literally invented it when I was an undergrad. And there was no undergrad degree in computer music, but I was like, there should be. We should have this degree. And I went through this whole process and convinced the university to let me get a degree in computer music, which of course qualifies you to do nothing. And then I went and got a degree in criminology, a master's of philosophy in criminology under the Faculty of Law at Cambridge University, which of course is even less useful, I hope.
I mean, I can see the straight line from one to the other.
Very clear. It's very clear. And I did go to law school, which makes some sense. Anyway, and then I was a litigator in New York for a while. But then I came back. I had gone to Stanford undergrad and I came back to the Bay Area in the late 90s when the internet was exploding and it was amazing. And one of my dorm mates and friends from my freshman year when we were 18-year-olds was a guy named Jerry Yang who started Yahoo. And so a bunch of those early Yahoo people were friends of mine, and I became one of their outside lawyers, one of many, like junior lawyer. The very first thing I did for them was to help them buy a company called ViaWeb, which was started by an unknown person named Paul Graham. And that was Paul's first thing. And so then I got to know Paul and went to the very first YC demo day in Cambridge. But anyway, I was kind of a loudmouth, as is shocking to you, I know. And I was an attorney representing a bunch of startups, and I would go to their board meetings. And board meetings, for those of you who've been to board meetings, you know this, and those of you who haven't, board meetings is just a bunch of people sitting around talking about your business and saying, maybe you should do this, or have you thought about doing that, or have you met this person, or you should think about that. And the lawyer's job is to sit there and take notes. That's it, like sit and quietly take notes. And if you're proposing something profoundly illegal, the lawyer might say, that's illegal, right? That, and then they make minutes. But as I'm sure is shocking to you, Leslie, I did not do that.
You did not sit and,
Sit quietly.
Yeah.
I would say things like, how are you going to hit that number? Like that number only moved 0.2% last year. You think it's going to move 3 points this year? Like, what's going to do that? Meanwhile, your clients are looking at you like, ixnay on the, Avenue Ray or whatever, and, but the good news is I met a bunch of smart people and I got to engage with lots of interesting venture investors. And after one of those board meetings, a VC guy named Dave Marquardt said, "Hey, have you ever thought about the venture business?" I said, "Yeah, that sounds great." And that started a journey. I spent a lot of months trying to convince them that I could be a VC, even though I was an attorney and had no legitimate reason to be a VC. And eventually they said, "We can't come up with a reason not to make you a VC." And so I joined the firm as an investor. I withdrew from the bar, and that was 24 years ago. And I've been a VC ever since. So eventually I found my way to something that was amazing. As my mother put it, you talked your way into a job that only involves talking. And I was like, true.
Perfect job. So originally you were with August Capital, and did you relaunch or launch a new VC firm? Tell us about Lobby Capital.
Yeah, it's really a reimagining of the same thing, right? When I joined August Capital, we were investing our third fund. There were 4 partners at the time, and so I was there from August 4, 5, 6, 7, and that was a 20-year period of time. And over the course of those 20 years, the founders and folks who were there when I got there retired and moved on and to do other things. And ultimately, my partner, Eric Karlborg, and I finished investing August 7 and said, do we want to raise August 8 or do we want to do something else? What are the things we loved doing? What are the things we would like to engage with? And in the process of that, we decided that we would rename the firm Lobby Capital, that we would be very focused on early stage investments, Series A investments, because they're the most fun. And we can get into it, but it was really a byproduct of wanting to be refocused, but also to lean into this lobby community, this conference that I created almost 20 years ago, that now is a community of 2,500 amazing people.
So let's actually jump into that because it feels like they're kind of one and the same. And then I'm going to come back to you and your journey after. But I think,
yeah,
I know from the questions that came in that folks want to know, like, tell us about the Lobby Conference. Like, what is it? How did it come up? Yeah, tell us a story.
I mean, it's kind of the same craziness, right? I mean, I was supposed to dutifully be a lawyer and do lawyer things, and yet I found myself doing other things. And then I became a VC, and I was supposed to dutifully be a VC and do VC things. And yet in the process, I was going to all these conferences to meet people, to talk to entrepreneurs and investors and smart people. And all I wanted to do was have a conversation. I just wanted to hang out with folks like you and say, "Oh, how'd you end up doing, like Graham Walker, what was the path to that? And oh, that's cool. What are you focused on? And oh, interesting. How do you think your entrepreneurs are different?" And blah, right? I just wanted to have a discussion. And yet all of these conferences put you in a dark conference room with people on a panel, God forbid, saying nothing, and I would know because I was always on those panels. So I inevitably was like, just try and say something funny. It's all you've got. No, nothing else is interesting, And so I started talking to people. First of all, I stopped going into that dark room because it seemed useless to me. And so I spent all my time in the lobby, and people would come into the lobby and they'd say like, "Hey, Hornik, how are you?" And we'd chat. And then they go, "I'm going to go hear so-and-so speak." And I'd say, "Have fun." And they'd go in, someone else would come out, and I'd chat with the next person. And eventually I just said to people, wouldn't it be better if it was just this? Like, wouldn't you rather just go to an event where we're chatting with smart people and engaging in a way as humans, and there are no speakers and there are no panels, and everybody, to a person, I never heard a single person say, no, that sounds like a terrible idea. They're all like, yeah, that sounds great. Totally. And eventually a friend of mine was like, David, stop talking about this. Either do it or shut up, you know? And I was like, well, oh, you mean I'm supposed to do this? I'm like actually supposed to create this conference. And they're like, well, if you want to have it, then just do it already. And I thought, oh, well, all right, that's interesting. I got connected to this amazing woman named Leah Lorenzano, who had created Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference and had run, the demo conference and the All Things Digital conference. And when she talked with me, she's like, oh, it's the chicken and egg problem. No one ever knows. Do you come because of the speakers and stay for the audience? You come because of the audience and stay for the speakers. And I said, well, I'll answer that question for you. I'm not going to have speakers. And she said, great, let's do it. So 18 years ago, she and I ran around Hawaii looking at hotels because I said, if you're going to do a conference and it's just about hanging out and chatting, you might as well do it somewhere nice. and to your angelic child behind you, I said, why wouldn't I do it in a place where my wife and my children would want to come along and spend time? And so, in fact, the lobby at these conferences, the closing party, all family members, all kids are invited. And some people bring them and some people bring spouses and significant others and some don't. And the idea is to be your whole self and engage with this amazing community. And if I get it right and invite amazing people, the rest of it is just sort of window dressing. There's lots of it. I do all sorts of fun stuff. But it could be in Toledo in a basement. It wouldn't make a bit of difference as long as you and all your friends showed up, right?
Yeah. I mean, I went to the lobby this year. I guess what I want to say, I think I said this to you over email, is that what was shocking to me as someone who is also on those stages, et cetera, and have been to other unconference style, for the caliber of people that were there, they were shockingly unpretentious. Just so refreshing. I cannot, you should be so proud.
Well, I'll tell you,
it's so hard to achieve. Get 200 late stage founders and VCs together and have everybody be authentic.
Yeah, it is shocking. What? Part of it is conditioning. You're told from the very beginning, get over yourself.
Yeah.
I show up in some ridiculous costume, so it's a little hard to take yourself too seriously. And then you play this complicated game where it turns out you discover that everybody's smarter than you are, and it doesn't matter who you are. But there is another piece of it, which is I talk to everyone before they get invited.
Yeah.
And so people, I ask folks like you, who would be great? Who's an amazing person you think I should bring? That already gets me to 95% of the way there because you've already been, right? So you would not say, oh, I'm going to invite my most arrogant founder because that'll be great. You'd know that would be
they'll fit right in.
It'll be awesome. That said, every so often someone does get invited, they're like, oh, she's smart, you'll like her, but whatever. And so I spend a half hour on the phone and go, no. It's very, in 20 minutes, you can learn a huge amount about people. And the majority of the time, like you and I had an amazing conversation. And by the end of that conversation, oh, well, we're best friends. Of course you should come to the lobby. And then I spend the last 10 minutes trying to convince you to come. Oh, you have to come to this thing. It's amazing. Which is hard because it's hard. People have to figure out oh, it's in Hawaii and it's not right. And I say, no, it's really a business conference. It sounds like, But once you've come, then you okay, yeah. I've seen it, I get it.
Oh yeah. And next time, if it, I did see a lot of founders, both women and men, who brought their kids. It's just incredibly refreshing. So, but truly kudos. I also want to give you an opportunity to talk about the female founders version of Lobby.
Yeah.
Together. So why don't you, because this is a great audience for that.
Yeah, no, perfect. So what happened was I started the Lobby and my closest friends were all in the consumer world. They were all doing consumery things. And so I said, let's create a gathering. The first group was 150 people showed up and they were all in the consumer space. They were, Ev Williams before he started Twitter, and Reid Hoffman as he was starting LinkedIn, and Tony Hsieh, rest in peace, at building Zappos, etc. The founders of Uber met each other at the lobby, etc. And after a series of years of that, some people like, oh, we should have an enterprise version that's people selling to businesses. And that was the first piece of the evolution. Then I met with this incredible founder named Sue Kim. And Sue said, look, the venture world is not doing a good job for women. And these events like yours are not doing a good job for women. And I'm trying to solve that problem. And I said to her, actually, I agree with you. And I said, I was not intentional about it at all in the early days. And sitting on my desk was, before every lobby conference, I send something to the people who are attending so you can see who's coming. And the theme of that year was sports, and everybody got a baseball card. So sitting on my desk from year 2, I think, was the baseball cards that I had made for the event. So each person who attended was based. So I said, let me show you. I said, let's look at what a terrible job I did. And I opened this deck and I started just throwing out these cards. Oh, there's Dick Costa, there's so-and-so, there's so-and-so, there's so-and-so. I think I got through like 80 people before I got to the first woman. And by 50, I was crying. Like, it was literally
cringing. Yeah.
It still kills me. And she said, well, you can do better. And I said, I agree. And I'm already started to do better. But it was after that meeting that I became very, very intentional. Like, okay, we're not done here until it's 50-50 men and women. And we're not there yet. Lobbyists now call it 40% women, which is a huge step, but again, not success, and have done a less good job of founders of color, people of color, done a somewhat better job of LGBTQ founders, in part because I've sat on the GLAAD board for a decade. And so I have lots of friends in the queer community who come. But anyway, so now I have lobby consumer, I have lobby enterprise, 250 people in October and March, and was trying to make it a more egalitarian gathering. And meanwhile, we started Lobby Capital, and my very dear friend, Selena Tabakawala, who is the founder of Evite and then the president and CTO of SurveyMonkey, et cetera, became a venture partner and sat in on a bunch of pitches. And she said, you know what? I advise female founders. I'm watching female founders pitches, and I think we should do something to try and help women founders be more successful. Because they approach this differently, and they don't have all the inside information, and they don't have the relationships, et cetera. And so I said, that makes perfect sense. We should do something about that. And so we created Lobby Elevate. And Lobby Elevate is a gathering. We just had the first female founder summit, and we had the first founders of color summit. And the idea is get together 50 to 100 female founders, 50 to 100 Black and Latinx founders, bring them together to talk about the process, et cetera, and then bring in another 50 VCs and have them pitch those VCs to get great feedback about how to be more successful, et cetera. What I learned is, first of all, everyone had an amazing time. But the reason they had an amazing time was they wanted to sit in a room with 50 other female founders, right? They wanted to talk with other female founders about the challenges. They wanted to talk with other founders of color about the challenges, And so I have Female Founder Summit coming up again in August, and I have Founders of Color Summit coming up in February. And I've made it a little more like the lobby, consumer and enterprise, because we're going to have user-generated conversations. We're going to have unconference sessions so that the community can really talk about the stuff that's important to them, right?
Whatever you want to talk about. How can folks get on that invite list?
Yeah, so I am two ways. I am actually have a call tomorrow morning with my team, because I said, gosh, we need to open up. We need to get registration going because people need to plan. I can tell you that the event is August 27th. which is challenging in the summer, but I wanted people to go into the year ready to pitch. And two things are going to happen. One, I'm going to ask you to recommend the best female founders you know, who will have female and non-binary founders who are out raising capital in the coming year. And so they should get you to recommend them. And secondly, we'll have an application process. And we had 150 applicants last time, and they were amazing. It's an amazing group. And then the challenge is I only have so much space. So stay tuned for both of those things. For you, for sure, helping me identify amazing people, and then for your community to be able to apply one way or the other.
We will share the details of that application when they are available to us.
Coming soon. I just need to get
we'll help you get the word out. So you know, it's funny. You and I met through Nancy.
Yep.
And I had heard about the lobby because I have like portfolio founders who have been there. I have like my own LPs who have been there, etc. And then we met, and it wasn't until I was like doing research for this fireside chat that I realized that I read about you years ago, years and years and years ago. And so I want to talk about it. So turns out that you are one of the guys that was in Adam Grant's book about helping people.
True.
So I'm going to read the book is from 2013. It's called Give and Take: Why Helping Others Drive Success. I read it. I don't even remember when. Definitely before I was a mom, because I don't read anymore. So it must have been like prior to 2016. And he featured, I think, like 4 or 5 examples of folks who just like are generous in business, and like in these like extremely cutthroat environments, and like what that does for them. So tell us about it. Like, do you still ascribe to that?
Oh,
like,
for sure, but it could be. Yeah. So what happened was, this is such the, fortuitous moment. Reid Hoffman had this thing called Silicon Valley Comes to the UK, where he took a group of people from Silicon Valley, and it wasn't entirely Silicon Valley, because actually our friend Nancy, who introduced the two of us, was on this trip. And we went to the UK to give founders advice about the thing, just like, here's how we think about company building, etc.
And this is, I mean, like a chronology, like when are we talking about here?
Sometime in, call it mid-2000s.
Okay.
And I had started the very first venture capital blog. I had a blog called VentureBlog, and wrote a lot and had a bunch of people reading it, because there was no other writing PC, so I could say anything I wanted, and people were like, oh my God, that's amazing. I wrote it very, quite, religiously for a decade. And so I met the editor-in-chief of Wired in the UK there, who said, oh, I read the stuff you write, and if you ever have anything you think would be interesting to put into Wired, let me know. And I said, sure, anytime. Like, just tell me what issue you want, and I'm sure I have things to say. It's awesome to meet you. And on my way to the plane to fly home, that editor emails me and says, hey, I just had a columnist drop out. Do you have anything you want to write about? And during that visit, I was reading in Stanford magazine this study by Stanford and Harvard Business School, where they had done some bullshit research that had determined that mean founders were more successful, CEOs were more successful. That by being a jerk, you were able to garner more respect, and blah, blah. It was just like insane. And I said, yes, I have something to write for you. When do you need it? And he said, well, the sooner the better. Do you think you could have it to me in like a day or two? And I said, I'll email it to you when I land in California. And on the plane, I wrote this thing, which was entitled Nice Guys Finish First Eventually. And it was me disputing this idiotic claim that you could be an asshole and that would somehow give you an advantage. And my primary point of view was, business is not a one-off set of interactions, right? If it was, then you and I could have this interaction and I could be a total asshole and whatever, and, you know, somehow make myself feel better. And then you'd ride off into the sunset and I would, and future interactions would have nothing to do with this conversation. On the other hand, there are dozens of amazing people sitting here listening to this conversation who are going to decide if I'm a terrible human or not. And if I am, hopefully, and I beg of all of you, when you encounter someone who's an asshole, pledge to yourself not to work with them. Say like, no, I don't want to work with you. I understand that you have money or influence or whatever. Fuck you. I would like to work with people who are decent humans and doing good things and helping the planet. And so I wrote this article. It said, I don't believe it. I think that business is about long-term relationships, and long-term relationships thrive from being a giver. I didn't use those terms at the time. Adam Grant was working on this book at the time, and some research assistant finds this article and reaches out to me and says, Adam Grant would like to speak with you. I don't know who Adam Grant is, but I say, sure, great. And I get on the phone with Adam in what was supposed to be a half-hour conversation. We talked for an hour and a half or two, and he's like, yeah, you're like, this is it. You believe what I believe, and I've done the research that says that if you pay it forward in a thoughtful way, it will be additive to your business experience, not deplete your capital. And I believe that fully. And he, you know, the reality is he used me in the opening chapter because there's a story where I'm this lovely giving human and then I get taken advantage of, you know? And so the first half of the chapter, you think, oh, that David, what an idiot. You know, and then luckily I'm redeemed. Oh, I'm redeemed for being, you know, and that was the story arc he wanted. And then he wanted to make the point that these things I was doing was ultimately a good idea, right? So yeah, total believer. Could, you know, to this day remain, you know, I mean, this is a great example, like this trio that was at this reception. I was chatting with them and I said, oh my God, you're amazing. Do you play other places? Sure. Great. Give me your email, because there'll come a time when I'm excited to have an event and you should come play it. Now, that's not really me being a giver at the end of the day. It's me being someone who's like, oh, these people are talented and let's find them opportunity. And I think I spend my life thinking about opportunity for others I engage with and interact with, because I think that makes for a better planet. It just turns out it also makes for you getting introduced to amazing people and great companies and funding great companies and all these things that I'm supposed to be doing. Theoretically, that's my day job, you know?
You know, it's I don't know if you realize that, but this is one of our values at Graham and Walker, and we have these like value stickers. So I'm gonna mail you one.
Yeah, exactly. I like it.
But it's hard and expensive not to allow assholes in this
Yeah.
business. You know, I have left money on the table. I have paid people back. Like I have paid investors back out of my 401k.
Just to like,
Like,
please go.
but it's really hard, and I want to dig in because it's particularly hard when you're the founder trying to raise at the beginning of your journey, when you don't have the social capital that you David have today, right? Or that I have today. So like when you're not in a position of power, it's a lot harder to be picky. And even myself as a kind of as a rising VC, right? Like I've been a VC for 3 years maybe, and like a founder for much longer before that. You know, you still kind of walk into these spaces, and like I firmly believe that you have to take the high road, which is another one of our values, and always kind of give first. And yes, I believe that we will, you know, nice guys and gals and everything in between will finish, we'll finish high. But in the meantime, how do you like prevent yourself from being a doormat? Right? Like
Yeah, so this is a really good question, and important, and also, and to be clear, like there are times when one has to engage with jerks, and one just has to understand how to engage with jerks. So the funny thing is, Adam writes this book, he sends me a draft to say like, hey, David, read through this and let me know if you're comfortable with it. I do the thing I do, which is I look for every instance where he references me in the index, and then I read them and say, oh my God, that's so nice. Great. I don't read the rest of the book. And then the book comes out and it's a New York Times bestseller and blah, 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 blah. And in the book, Adam talks about the idea that there are givers, people who pay it forward. And there are takers, people who are just trying to extract value from you. And they're matchers, people who say like, I'll give you this if you give me that, right? And he says, there are two types of givers. They're givers who are successful and they're givers who are unsuccessful. The unsuccessful ones give indiscriminately, and the successful ones understand that they can't just give, or people will take advantage of them, in particular the takers, right? So I'm thinking about this on an airplane flight, and I email Adam and I say, Adam, it's interesting. I've been thinking about your paradigm and how I engage with the planet and how it is that I'm able to be one of these givers, not one of these givers, right? And I said, and the answer is that I give everyone the benefit of the doubt that they are in fact givers. And as long as you're a giver, I will give to you until, from here to forever. The moment that you demonstrate you are not a giver, and by the way, most people aren't, and they quickly demonstrate quite definitively that they are not givers, then I change my behavior and I treat matchers and takers exactly the same way. And the answer is, I said to Adam, what I do is I match. If you want to trade something of value for me, having you give you something of value, great. That's fine. I understand that you're kind of a loser and that this is just some exchange of value. Like, great. I understand who you are. I think that's a shitty worldview. I will not go out of my way to do business with you. But hey, if you want to trade, fine. And if you're a taker, I'm going to say, hey, I'm on to you. No, you can't take advantage of me. I will be a thoughtful negotiator and engage in a fair trade. And then fine, you're a loser. I'll do my best to not work with you in the future unless you have something good I want. And then I'll trade you for it. So I email Adam and I say, hey, by the way, this is how I think about it. And Adam says, oh, good for you, Hornik. As always, you blah, blah, blah. You got to my conclusion in chapter 7 or whatever it is. And I was like, huh. And I emailed him back and I said, yeah, well, my bad. I apologize. I'm dyslexic. I didn't read the book. I only read the bits about me. I'm really sorry.
That's really funny.
And Adam writes back like, no worries. By the way, it is available on audiobook. but I was caught. And this is a little bit of a challenge. Well, okay, fair enough. But that is my philosophy, and it is ultimately Adam's philosophy, which is, look, there are givers, there are takers, and there are matchers in this world. Don't give them everything, match them, because that's called doing business. And there are times you need to do that. That's fine.
That's right. Speaking of, so you and I had a great conversation that kind of first evening, about dyslexia, because my kiddo, not the little angel devil. Yeah. not Ruth. She's called Ruth the Closer, because every time I bring up the meeting, I like close the investor. This is a true story. I'll tell you one day.
Amazing.
No, my oldest kid was diagnosed with dyslexia a year ago and some other learning challenges, which I don't normally talk about publicly, but this is kind of a private, I guess we're being recorded, so I just did. So we'll edit this part out. And then you talked to me about your journey and how that has sort of helped you see the world differently, and kind of, let's talk about that, because so much of venture capital is like recognizing patterns in a different way than everybody else, right? Which is
yeah.
Dyslexia.
Well, it's interesting, right? I mean, I think to a certain degree that's true. I also think that there are a lot of venture investors who are confused about what actually, I need to be a technologist and understand technology trends and blah, 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 blah. And the reality is what you need to do is identify amazing humans. And yeah, there are amazing humans who are building things that don't make sense or aren't going to be big and whatever. But it is what it is. Like, mostly you're looking for amazing people who are passionate and are engaged and think big and are are intellectually curious and those things. And because dyslexics have to use different signals, right? If it's this interesting thing. I always talk about this. People think that the number one indicator of smart people, and certainly this seems to be the number one indicator of smart kids, is that they're readers, right? Like, oh, and when you hang out with smart adults, they inevitably say, oh, did you read that thing? Oh, did you read so-and-so's book? Oh, did you read so-and-so's book, right? Oh, the most erudite people are people who write and read books. And that's a very complicated world for me and other dyslexics, because when you are in these conversations, you either pretend you did, which isn't true, or you acknowledge that, when I say to people, I don't really read, they're like, what? Like, what an idiot, I'm like, no, not an idiot, just a dyslexic. But then you have to explain it. I was just on a conference call with a consultant who had a big set of criteria and said, which of these do you prioritize? And I started reading. I said, it's going to take a while. I'm dyslexic. So there'll be some uncomfortable silence for a while. And she was like, okay, but most people don't have to do that. Most smart people just go, now I've consumed it. For the dyslexics among us, and there are a huge number of founders who are dyslexic, there are a huge number of creatives who are dyslexic, et cetera. It's about connections, right? It's taking a limited number of data points and then making a set of predictions and guessing, because shoot, I'm guessing what a sentence says, so it turns out those are unbelievably valuable skills across the board. So I think there are lots of great things that being dyslexic brings to bear if you can manage to get through the system that judges you if you're not a reader.
It's like very touching.
By the way, I'll tell you this, and I gave one talk and I was talking about the fact that I had this little brother who's a super genius, which he is. He's like super genius. And he was reading when he was 3. And I figured out that I had a tool. He was 3 and I was 5. And I was like, sweet, I don't need to read. I need my brother to read. And I made my brother read things to me. I'd be like, Josh, read the directions of this game, and then he'd read them. And then I go, all right, this is how we play the game. Hey, Josh, it's bedtime. Read our bedtime story, And I joke, like, people think that smart people read, but really smart people get other people to read for them.
That's very Tom Sawyer of you.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. And trust me, it's been my entire life.
Every time I come to realize that someone with dyslexia has kind of come through the other side, it's a very meaningful, emotional kind of conversation. I probably shouldn't have kept it out of this because now I'm struggling to like move on.
Yeah. Trust me, I get it. At least 2 of my kids are dyslexic.
2 of your kids are dyslexic?
One tested and determinatively so. My other had other mental health challenges that I think were loomed bigger than her dyslexia. But what cracks me up about her is, so she meets her boyfriend in grad school, and they're in grad school, and he's this he's such a great kid and lovely and hardworking, and he reads everything, diligently reads everything. And my daughter is like me and doesn't do shit, but is very, very good at gaming the system. And so they would come over for dinner, and he would say, I do not understand. We're in the same classes. I read everything. She reads nothing. Then she launches into some big statement in class that makes her seem like she knows more about the book than I do and ends up getting better grades. Like, this is ridiculous. I say, yeah, welcome to the manipulative world of dyslexia. Like, what you do is you spend the first half of the class listening to everybody else so you have context, and then you make crap up as if you'd read the things they did that they just educated you on. That is what dyslexics do.
So in the spirit of kind of helping the folks who are in the audience as they are going through their journeys, it's can you talk to us about, like, I even hate this question before I ask it, but like, how can people stand out? You know what I mean? Because like, it's not, I realize that it's hard to answer because you have to be yourself, and like,
the truth is, I back all sorts of different kinds of people, and I was just catching up with an entrepreneur who he's like the only human who is louder than I am. We met for the first time. I was the tech curator for the TED conference, and I heard about this amazing project he was doing. He was a professor at USC, and I put him on stage, and then I decided, like, oh, this is actually kind of interesting. And I was at a soccer tournament with my daughter, and I drive up to LA to meet this guy and his daughter, his little baby daughter, for breakfast, because that's the time he had available. And in between his daughter eating my blueberries and whatever, we were discussing things. And we're in this little cafe, and I realized we are so loud. Like, every other human is just like, you two are so loud. And we were having so much fun, which just made us louder, like louder and louder. It was amazing. And then I have these introverted, like quiet, thoughtful people, where you're like, huh. So it's not a thing, right? There's no stereotype. There's no, I'm looking for a thing. I'll tell you what you need to be, though. You need to be the expert on the thing you're doing because you're obsessed with it. Not because you think it's a task to do, but because the thing you're doing, you care deeply about. Like, oh my God, I could not care about anything more than this problem I'm trying to solve. And as a byproduct of that, I have examined every other attempt to solve this problem. And I've come to the conclusion that those attempts are not successful attempts for a set of reasons. And therefore, that is why I'm doing this thing, because I have no other choice. It is the thing I'm obsessed with and will do. And I have done all the work that any obsessive would do to understand everything that surrounds it. Mm-hmm. That's my best entrepreneurs are that. And sometimes it's because they were experts in a field and then they learned all this thing. And sometimes just because they're crazy people, and they're like, I have to solve this problem. And then they learn everything,
And can you glean that from email communication, or is that something that comes like in person? Like, how do you?
Yeah, you have to talk to them, right? Because it's really about answering questions. It's not about presenting. It's about, right, like, oh, that's interesting. What about this? And how do you think about this? And so Zoom is great and awful. Like, I think it's extraordinarily efficient. And I love the fact that there are dozens of people who otherwise wouldn't be sitting in my office with me. And that's amazing. But I have made the mistake of funding people only having spent time on Zoom with them. Terrible idea. Like, I will never do that again. After you spend time and have that conversation and think it's interesting, then go sit down with them as humans. So I was very excited about a particular company. I did a bunch of work. I talked to a bunch of people. I got a sense of who they were. One of them was in Austin. One of them was here. I said, hey, I'm going to fly to Austin for the weekend, over the weekend, and tell me any 2 hours we can hang out. And the founder said, well, actually, I'm going to be up on Monday. You want to have dinner? And I was like, done. And I took the two founders to dinner, and we spent, I don't know, 2 hours or 2.5 hours. And at the end of those 2.5 hours, like, oh yeah. Like, first of all, not only are they amazing and am I excited to fund them, but also then they had a very clear idea of who I am. Because, like, you can imagine it only takes a handful of minutes watching me that, like, not everybody's going to love that. Not everybody's going to be like, oh yeah, I hope that I can spend a decade with Hornik, you know, but some will. Some will be like, oh my God, I love that energy. I'm excited about it. And they're like, oh, is this what you're like all the time? Yeah, pretty much. Like, it's not, this is not like a moment in time.
You're taking a court seat every time that you invest,
I
right?
sit on the board. You know, I just had this conversation with two founders, two amazing founders I'd backed. This guy, Rob Doss, had been the founder of Splunk. I funded him when there were three guys and an idea. And I funded this guy, Rene Lacerte, over two companies and for a long time. And we were talking about our relationship, and I said, well, part of it is that after we got to know each other, I ultimately funded the company. Every other week, Rene and I would do this thing called walk the dish. There behind Stanford, there's this big, you know, kind of hour-and-a-half loop through the foothills. And Rene and I would walk, you know, every other week we'd walk through the foothills and talk about his business and our families. Like, oh, what's up? What are you doing? And I said to Rene, and someone said, like, oh, that's great. You know, like, how long did you do that? Right. And I said, I don't know, Rene, what do you think? How long do you think we did that kind of every other week? And Rene said, 15 years. Wow. Like that, you know, now we've been working together for 24, which means that 9 of them, we only walk the dish every so often. But for 15 years, like, that was how we engaged, and we learned a lot about each other and he helped me and I helped him, and it was amazing. And if I could do that with every entrepreneur, I would in a heartbeat.
You know, funny story, but at the lobby game, I was in Renee's team, and but I had no idea who he was. Him, and also Deep, so for the audience, one of the GPs at General Catalyst, and the chief revenue officer of the Coca-Cola company were in my team, randomly assigned.
Good team.
Yeah. And but we, you know, you don't have time to introduce each other. It's like 200 people there, so you just get put together. So basically, I spent 2 hours bossing Rene Lacerte around. He was, and like just joking, and we had like I mean, it was such a fun team. And then after the thing is over, and we all sit down to lunch, and we're asking each other, like, you know, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I founded this company.
Yeah, founded Bill.com. Yeah,
we public. I was like, oh, how far along are you? He's like, oh, we're public.
Well,
like,
and
oh
he's
my God,
Rene,
you are. I'm so sorry.
What he assuredly didn't tell you is that, you know, I funded him when it was just getting started.
Yeah.
Bill.com moves one of every $100 in the American GDP.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
1% of GDP. Meanwhile, by the way, Pam Stewart, the chief, the head of the Coke, was the chair of GLAAD. Yeah. So she ran GLAAD. She's this super powerful Black gay woman, and she is like a force of nature. So that's pretty good. And Deep is, you know, who had been one of, you know, very senior exec, and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's quite a powerhouse team.
That was a hell of a team. I'm going to send you a picture, and you have to ask.
I wonder who else was on that team.
Rene said that this was like the most fun that he had. And I think it's probably just because, like, you know, we just could not give two shits about who he was, right? Like, nobody was trying to impress anyone.
No, exactly.
Like, joking about what time are the Mai Tais, and like talking about our families. And I was just an incredible experience. So go check in with him and he'll tell you.
Love that. Well, I not next week, but the week after, we have an offsite, because Rene is a big fan of like spending real time together. So we are down by the beach, and we spend dinner and whatever. So
okay, we're getting to the end of our time, and so I want to kind of open up. If folks have questions in the audience, then please write them here. In the meantime, I'm gonna ask you very quickly, David, 2 questions. The first is, how can founders here connect with you, or can they? Like, can they reach out? How would you like people to reach out to you? And the second is, what can our community do for you today?
Well, the first is easy. Hornik at lobby.vc. And I'm sure it'll come as no surprise since I'm dyslexic. It doesn't really matter how you spell Hornik. I got all of them. So it'll come to me, but it is HORNIK at lobby.vc. So feel free to email me. There's a temptation to friend me on LinkedIn or whatever, but I've really taken LinkedIn seriously in ways that I think people mostly haven't. And my kids were quizzing me on this the other day because they're like, these are not actual friends of yours because there are thousands of them. And I said, try me. Like, pick one and tell me, and they're like, okay, great. Who's Leslie? All right. Nancy introduced me to Leslie. Leslie runs a female-led VC fund, and she came to lobby. And they're like, okay, who's whatever, right? So don't friend me on LinkedIn until we've had the chance to actually get to know each other, then do. But feel free to email me, and I'm happy to hear. I answer all my emails. And yeah, tell me what can you do? Like, tell me what awesome thing you're building. Like my life is spent trying to find the next awesome thing that someone's building. So please do that. And if you can join us or are interested in joining us at the Female Founder Summit, by all means, tell Leslie, or B, apply, and tell all your female founder friends that, because it's an awesome event, and it'll be great to get a bunch of amazing people there.
Amazing. So not seeing questions. Jenna, can you flag over Slack if you are getting questions in the back end?
There's nothing. I've worn them down.
Let's see. Oh, okay. So I have one here. Thanks, Jenna. So we talked a lot about how you stand out in the meeting. How do you stand out in an email? Right? Like, how do you get that meeting?
Yeah, that's hard.
What do you have to say about it? Like, what tips?
Well, the obvious cheat code is that you get introduced by someone I know and care about. I call it the transitive property of reputation. So if you may recall in elementary school or whatever, the transitive property is if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. And my version is, if I love Leslie and Leslie loves you, I love you. That's the shorty, right? So getting an introduction through someone that someone respects, who then says something meaningful, like, this is a fantastic entrepreneur, that's the best. Which is not fair because, and particularly not fair to women, and particularly not fair to founders of color, who are less likely to have that, broad network, etc. The second answer is to be specific, right? I say I answer all my emails, and that is true, except when you say, I used to even answer the Dear Sir emails. And now I kind of have come to the realization, like, just because you send me an email doesn't mean I have some obligation to respond. And if you haven't even taken the time to, to personalize it. And interestingly, I recently got an email and it was, dear Frank, blah, 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 and some other venture firm. And I emailed the founder back and I said, hey, your business isn't a good fit for us. It's too early. And FYI, your title and your name and your company were wrong, which means either you forgot to swap them, or there's something wrong with your your auto create. Either way, you should probably double check that. And I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I was, and I've done that a lot. And half the time people say that, thank you so much, I really appreciate it. And half the time they say, fuck you. I'm really not trying to be a jerk. I'm trying to be helpful.
I at least for our team, like, we try to honor people's time with our time. And so if it's clear that you put 0 time, that's what you're going to get back.
Yeah.
If like with Catalyst applications, we have a lot of Catalyst participants here in the room today. You guys put hours into that application, and let me tell you, we put hours into reading them. And so you kind of have that, like, if you give me your time, I will honor it with mine. Which is a big deal. It's the number, it's the number one non-renewable resource that I have, is like my life. Like, there's like one of it.
Somewhat ironically, I guess, we'll see how it goes. My daughter, said dyslexic daughter, just took a job in Stanford's admissions team, and she's going to have to read so so much. I hope she survives. She might have to convince someone to read it to her.
Yeah. We'll get like one of those like reader
Yeah,
gadgets.
exactly.
Well, I love to hear about how well your dyslexic daughter is doing, because I hope the same for mine.
Oh, for sure.
David, it has been so much fun to chat with you. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, we do have a couple of questions in the audience, but we're getting towards the end of time. Do you guys want to put them in the chat for us, and we'll follow up with you afterwards. We'll try to get some written answers from David. We'll share it across email or social media. And then I'm going to share what our next forum is, which is a really interesting one. As many of you probably know, I have this like slight obsession with takedowns, with like how women are particularly targeted for media kind of sensationalist media stories, and when that happens, the consequences are far more punitive than they are for men, because it's not to say that everybody's an angel or whatever, right? Like, you can make mistakes, but the consequences of being taken down for your mistakes when you're a woman are kind of fatal for your career. And so I've like in my time stood up for women who are faced with that, and what I've learned is that you can actually put things in place to protect yourself a little bit down the line. And I did not know that. And so we're actually going to talk to an expert in this who has helped female founders, some of whom you know. She's not going to say who they are. But she's a crisis communication specialist who has helped several of the kind of most egregious female founder takedowns, and has tips on what you can do in the beginning to protect yourself from kind of sensationalist attempts at like destroying your career. And so please join us. I don't have the date in front of me, but we will share it. And the RSVP will be in your inboxes. David, any parting
That was
words?
fun.
This has been so much fun. I tried it.
Thanks
I lost my train
thanks
of
for
thought.
having me. Appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much for being here. I'll see you in Hawaii, if not sooner.
Yeah, hopefully sooner. No, see us in Napa at the Female Founders
I'll see you
Summit.
in Napa. Okay, well, we'll talk about
It's
it.
it's in Carneros, which, by the way,
I love
best
that.
food of
Yeah.
any conference ever.
Yeah. I have been to a separate conference there, so yes. Okay. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your life with us. And everybody, thank you for your time. I hope that you had fun, that you learned something, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.